Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of November and the new moon that we have coming up in Scorpio on the 20th. I am filming this early on the 2nd of November, partly because I think it's going to be a fairly dynamic week electromagnetically, just to make sure I have it recorded in the bag, as it were. So you don't need to listen to it, obviously, until after the full supermoon in Taurus on the 5th. But at least I'll manage to get it filmed anyway. That may not occur. It may take a different form, but we certainly have a very dynamic first week in November, as I covered in my previous video. And I'd just like to, again, before we get into the astrology, just like to thank you for all your immense support and very loving comments that you give to me every week. They mean the world to me. So thank you, thank you. We really are living in extremely exciting times now. And as I hope this video for the second half of November will cover in some detail, but I hope it's not going to turn into another Pamble, but it certainly has the potential for that. So just before we look at the chart for the 20th of November, just to remind you that Neptune is now at 29 degrees, the anaretic degree of Pisces, and Uranus is at 29 degrees, the anaretic degree, or will be, as of the 8th of November. The 8th of November, it retrogrades back into Taurus, into that 29th anaretic degree of Taurus. So they will be exactly sextile for this second half of November. And this is I think the second in a row of 5 exact sextiles. The unique configuration I've talked about in great detail of Pluto trine to Uranus and then Saturn Neptune at the midpoint is really certainly the Pluto Uranus Neptune side of it is very close to exactitude, and it's going to become exactly on the 18th of July next year, but more of that in a later video. So Uranus and Neptune together have a lot to do with electromagnetism themselves. And the conjunction, the seed point for this sextile happened in 1993. And that was really the beginning of the internet. So it's very related to technology, Uranus going viral, Neptune, technology going viral. And of course, the next step at this sextile in that is very obviously AI, virtual reality, goggles, etc., augmented reality, that is even on some government websites. So yes, that's very much on one timeline what that's all about. On another timeline or expression, it's about dimensions of reality that we never knew existed. It's highly mystical. It can break us through to these new levels of psychic sensitivity that I think is happening for many of us. It's very much linked to spiritual upgrades, and yeah, these are very much the times we are in. Very much linked to galactic energy because of the Uranus side of it. Uranus representing the outsider, the maverick, the one who doesn't fit. So it's very related to galactic energy, partly because it's also Uranus in myth was the sky god. So that's another link to the galactics too. Now, because they're both at or they will be by the 8th of November, both at the anaretic degrees of their signs, Neptune, as you will well know, is related to seas and oceans, but also flooding, tsunamis. Uranus is related to high winds and storms and hurricanes. And my goodness, because Neptune is really hovering around that world axis point of 0 of Aries, that throws anything Neptunian onto a bigger stage, as it were. So it emphasizes or highlights Neptunian matters. So sadly, we've seen some really terrible flooding in Alaska, devastating. In Mexico, we've just had that massive Hurricane Melissa. In Jamaica, I think 50 people died in that. It was just really horrendous for people. So these kind of extreme weather events, some natural, some unnatural, of course, are likely to continue for a while. So please, in your meditations, just try and calm everything down. Keep everything soothed and calmed. So, because I do think we absolutely can make a difference to the severity of these weather events. It's very related to seismic activity, of course, as well, Uranus, and I'll be talking about that more in a moment, because that's, as well as being very prominent at the first lunation of the month in the full moon in Taurus, seismic activity is very prominent in the second lunation, what we're going to be talking about here, the new moon in Scorpio. Be also aware of things like internet scams, because internet, Uranus, Neptune is to do with fraud, things not being what they seem, deception, that kind of thing. So identity theft, just be super hyper vigilant about checking bank statements, credit card statements. Really keep an eye on that, because this is a time when things could go astray in that regard. So cyber attacks, that kind of thing. So yes, keep an eagle eye on all of that. So let me now show you the chart for the new moon, and we'll talk about that. So here we see the new moon at 28 degrees and 12 minutes of Scorpio, with Mercury, what's called Cazimi, in this very tight, it's inferior conjunction, a very tight conjunction to the new moon, the sun and the moon. This is happening on the 20th of November, as I say, 6:48 on the clock, GMT. We're now in GMT, winter time here. Ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. We're just going to look at the signs, where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. So the first thing we notice is an extremely tight opposition to Uranus, 29, 29, 28, 12. So it's really just over a degree from exactitude, so really tight. So opposition, things appearing to come from the outside. So again, this could be seismic activity. Because it's now in Taurus, we could also see more volatility in the markets, with banking, with cryptocurrencies. It's been very interesting, because even before, when Uranus was just on the verge of tipping retrograde back into Taurus, we had huge volatility in the precious metals market, and Taurus, because it's linked to natural resources, is very connected to precious metals. So we had gold and silver hitting, I believe, their all-time highs, and then they drop back quite significantly. That kind of volatility is going to increase, particularly with Uranus at that final degree of Taurus. And it's going to be hovering around there, certainly through November. Let me just check quickly in my ephemeris. It's going to be at 29 degrees for the rest of November, up until, late, really, into the early first couple of days of December. Whereas Neptune stays at 29 degrees of Pisces until it leaves there on the 27th of January next year to move it to Aries. So anything seismic, shocks, surprises, all of the things you would expect me to say about Uranus, but do watch particularly anything to do with finance once Uranus has moved back into Taurus. It's going to stay in Taurus until the 26th of April next year, then moves fully direct into Gemini until 2033. So, but this is a new moon in Scorpio. So new moons, it's perfect time in the month to set a new intention about the new seed you want to plant. So see where 28 of Taurus falls in, Scorpio falls in your chart. That house area is perfect for planting your new seeds, setting your intention for whatever you want to blossom in your life. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, You can download a free birth chart from my website. You can go to the link below and get a 2-part video series that you can watch to infinity about where these points in your chart fall with every update I do and what it means for you in your life. At least you'll know where to look and get the meaning of those. So these are teaching videos, not a personalized birth chart analysis. So a lot of emotion with Scorpio, intense emotion. So what are you feeling that emotion about? Well, look to the house area where it's falling in your chart, and that may give you some idea. But certainly we have a lot of water in this chart. We have a grand trine in water. So we have Jupiter in Cancer, Neptune, Saturn in Pisces, and these 3 planets in Scorpio. So we have in total 6 planets in water. So this is a very emotional time. I'll come back to the other meanings of the grand trine in a while. So we're going to be feeling very intensely, very emotional, very overwhelmed, Pisces. It's all too much. We're going to be feeling a lot of emotion. And I'm going to start to come on to some of the subject areas why that might be the case. It's to do with your passion, your focus. Just before we leave Neptune and Uranus in their anaretic degrees of Taurus and Neptune, I think I touched on this in the last update. I think this is going to bring in not only greater compassion for all beings caught up in severe weather and, of course, terrible wars that continue just endlessly, but also Earth itself, Gaia, and all of her precious creatures, sea life, Neptune, sea life, animal life in general, Gaia, the trees, the forests, plant life. In a way, with a sensitivity I doubt that many of us have felt in this lifetime. You know, we've lived modern lives in cities quite separated from nature very often and just exploited it. And I think that's on a big turnaround right now, partly catalyzed by these extreme weather events. We suddenly realize how much we've abused nature and its creatures and how we need to take much better care in stewardship of the earth and its all of its creatures, human, animal, plant, birds, all of it. And that's a very good thing, although we have to minimize the tragedy that's ensuing in the meantime. So one of the principal things about Scorpio is it's the par excellence, the sign to do with secrets. Secrets big time. And this opposition to Uranus, because Uranus is about the truth, the piercing sword of clarity, you know, we're suddenly seeing it with blinding clarity. This is about truth coming to light. And I think this actually marks the beginning of a new time of truth. A new time of truth that will continue. And just as and the truth can be around financial issues, Taurus, Scorpio, financial axis, around sexual secrets, Scorpio, hidden money, criminal money, that kind of thing. It can be about medical issues, because Scorpio and Virgo are the 2 signs associated with medicine. And of course, we still have our nodal axis in Virgo and Pisces. This is the health axis. This is to do with getting the body working like clockwork, but the Pisces end of it, and this is true of Neptune, its ruler too, about blood plasma, lymph, our immune system, those kinds of things. So the medical area is part of this whole picture. So secrets coming to light, I think, from this point on. I think this is birthing a new time of truth, dare I say. And just as one very recent example of this, On the 30th of October, Buckingham Palace announced that Prince Andrew, as he was, will no longer be Prince Andrew, but he will be Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. King Charles stripped him of all titles, all honours, and even his accommodation. And he's going to have private accommodation now. And this is linked to the ongoing scandals of Andrew's friendship, long-term friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier that we all know so much about. What was interesting was 3 years ago, at the invitation of Frank Clifford, the brilliant astrologer who runs the London School of Astrology, I did a chart analysis along with Frank and another astrologer, Richard Swatton, looking at the chart of Prince Andrew. That was back in, I think it was around about mid-2022, and re-listening to that, because Frank posted on Facebook again, re-listening to that was quite remarkable, because we were all really looking at 22, 23, but one of the things I mentioned at the end was that Andrew would have solar arc Uranus conjunct his IC opposite his midheaven at this time. Now, solar arc Uranus at the IC opposing the midheaven, you only obviously have once in a lifetime with solar arcs, and that is a radical, sudden, shocking change, both in your home accommodation, IC, and your status and reputation in the world, midheaven. So boy, did that deliver. And on top of that, there were other things that I mentioned on social media that I won't go into now, but that was one of the biggies. And also on the 30th of October, we had transiting Mars exactly opposing a fixed star called Algol, which is linked in the myth to losing your head. Now, losing your head can be people going crazy, people going mad. It can be a literal losing your head, but thankfully that doesn't happen very often these days. But it's very often linked to people losing their power or their position in some way. So that was a very dramatic development for Andrew, formerly Prince Andrew, and we have many more to come in terms of people in the public eye, people in high position from this point on. Because Uranus is going to be, from late December until early March, within 1 degree of Algol. Algol is at 2625 of Taurus. Remember that the fixed stars only move 1 degree in 72 years, so for a lifetime it's pretty much in the same place. And Uranus, transiting Uranus, will be within 1 degree of that from late December till early March. Watch this space. It's going to be very interesting. And linked to that, because Mercury Uranus on its own is about digging deep. This is all about digging deep. We've got to dig deep to get the truth. But to dig deep into Scorpio to get the truth. So even the Mercury-Uranus opposition is about that too. However painful it is, we have to dig deep to get the truth. And what emphasizes that is really two things. It's Jupiter, and I mentioned this in the last update because this is kind of long running, square to Chiron and Eris. And so this is about where we felt wounded, square to Eris. Eris has to get to the truth. It has to see justice. It has to see social equality, nobody excluded. It has to see truth. It's uncompromising. This is a square. It's very insistent. And it's enlarging that issue, Jupiter. And we feel very emotional about it as well. Another thing that emphasizes truth is we have Mars in Sagittarius. This is a real drive for the truth. Sagittarius, also linked to truth, also linked to the law, as you will know, in the search for truth. And Mars in Sagittarius can be kind of highly opinionated, dogmatic. This can lead to religious fundamentalism. Sometimes it's a kind of crusade almost, I think of it. But note that it is square to the nodal axis. It will become increasingly square, actually. Let me just check when it's exact. It's exact, on the 24th of November. It's exactly square that nodal axis. So the nodal axis is the south node is falling back to the past, maybe where we were just humbly being a people pleaser, and Pisces is much more to do with our idealism. And, more and more I want to link Pisces with Christ consciousness energy, that kind of purity of that transparency of being. We are no longer going to tolerate the deception, the lies. Neptune at the anaretic degree of Pisces, both linked to things not being as they seem. So here, the other thing that's giving us a drive for truth is Mars. It will drive. These three planets here are going to dig to get to the truth. Mars will drive to get to the truth. Jupiter will enlarge the issue to get to the truth. So this is going to be, it's just a really incredibly interesting time, I think, with, this is going to be very fast moving, I think. This can also create ongoing healing, of course. Jupiter square to Chiron, we really are, I think, turning the tide, and not only Jupiter square to Chiron helping our healing from victimhood, Chiron in Aries, wounded in the I am, but also the fact that Jupiter is trying to Neptune at the final degree of Pisces, and Neptune moves forward, as I say, on the 27th of January into Aries, which is about sovereignty. This marks the end of victimhood. Neptune in Pisces, the shadow side, I would say, one of the aspects is victimhood. So, yes, a lot happening here. Now, remember also another part of this, because Uranus rules Aquarius. Aquarius is also linked to the truth. This drive to get to the truth, which in an out of sign opposition to Jupiter is another aspect of truth coming to light. And we know at the moment that Pluto by transit is out of bounds to the south. So there's this more rebellious and revolutionary urge, which we're seeing all across the world, actually. And Pluto stays out of bounds to the south until the 23rd of November. And it will, in the last few months of each year until 2035, Pluto will go out of bounds to the south. But if I remember what Rosie Finn said correctly, with decreasing intensity, because it's not as far out of bounds beyond the 23 degrees beyond the ecliptic as it is here. But for sure, we are seeing a lot of protests, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of people rising up against their governments all over the world. So this emphasizes one of the themes of Pluto in Aquarius, which I've talked about a great deal, of power shifting to the people. There's another very obvious timeline that I've mentioned of Pluto in Aquarius, the shadow side of control by technology, but that's a very different timeline. So you have to choose which one you're going to focus on. As Pluto moves out of bounds to the south, on the 23rd of November, almost instantly, Mars on the 27th also becomes out of bounds until the 4th of January. So again, with any planet moving out of bounds, it suggests it operates in a quite extreme or uncontrolled way. So there is tremendous energy in these next few months, tremendous energy, as I'll go on to explain a little more. And Mars is going to stay in Sagittarius until mid-December, until the 16th of December. So there will be this terrific drive for truth, particularly from the Mars side up till then. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. Now, Saturn here is retrograde. It moves direct on the 28th of November, and it will stay in Pisces. It will keep on going direct until the 14th of February, when it enters Aries for the rest of its cycle, 29.5 years. So here it is finishing up old business. So see where 25 of Pisces falls in your chart, and that last 5 degrees of Pisces. Which house area is that in for you? I mean, for me, Saturn moved into Pisces in March 2023, and that was in my 4th house of the home. And I mentioned at the time the number of plumbing incidents I had from that time on was just ridiculous, because Saturn is problems, limitations, issues, and Pisces is related to plumbing. It's water in the home. It's water in the home. And I literally did have a lot of water in the home. So it's fascinating how literal this can be. So see where that falls for you. But this is finishing up old business. Where have you had to put work or effort or have responsibility, or where have you felt limited, or there have been obstacles? Where have you felt too small? Which area of life have you felt too small in? Not very good English, but because that is finishing up, and Saturn is only moving forwards now. So that can really help you understand what that's about. What decisions have you made while Saturn has been in Pisces in that house area that you want to move forwards in 2026? If it's in the 4th house, do you want to change your home? If it's in the 10th house, do you want to change your career? What's been kind of spinning a bit for you in that house area? In terms of global astrology, this is the reality check on things like the seas, the waters, toxicity, that kind of thing. It's also related to things like the media. There's a reality check on any illusion or deception or lies that we may have lived through. It's also related to drugs and addictions of all kinds. It's related to the pharmaceutical industry as well. So it's a reality check on the illusion. Because as of February next year, and the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune becomes exact on the 20th of February, but Neptune, as I say, is moving out of Pisces on the 27th of Jan. Saturn moves out of Pisces on the 14th of February. So they are really cleaning up whatever their job was to do in Pisces during that time. So what's the reality check on any kind of illusion that you've held in your life before we get to that 0 Aries of pure potentiality to create a whole new chapter in your life, a whole new chapter for humanity, actually? So be sure that you're cleaning that up. Be sure that you're not dragging a whole trunk full of baggage with you of the old stories and problems and limitations. That's really, for your own good, for your own best interests. Okay, it's also Saturn-Neptune, which reinforces many of the other things I've been talking about, is the dissolution of the old order. The last time we had a conjunction between Saturn and Neptune was in November 1989, the collapse of the Berlin Wall. You could not have a clearer, more dramatic indication of the ending of the dissolution of the old order, because that was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. And we're, very familiar with that. And as I've mentioned, I was in Berlin at the time and bought a hunk of the Berlin Wall. So it's interesting here that we've got 5 planets at this new moon in the last 2 degrees or so of their signs, We've got Neptune, we've got Uranus, that's 2, and we have another 3 here. So we have 5 planets in the last couple of degrees of their signs, really emphasize, 2025, as I said, right at the beginning in January, is a big, big year of endings and beginnings. And particularly we're seeing the endings in 2025. As we get into 2026, it's very different energy, and we are going to see a lot more new beginnings as we move through that year increasingly. So, but as I say, this grand trine in water is really very beautiful. It's equilateral triangle. They're considered very positive, very fortuitous, very lucky in some ways. And it's futuristic, it's visionary, it's idealistic, but it's also grounded with Saturn. What are we imagining? What are we dreaming in? Because this is the time. We are now in the chrysalis. We as caterpillars, we formed that hard shell. We are in the mush. We've gone to the mush. We've had our rehearsal through the last few months, the summer in Northern Hemisphere, winter in Southern. We've had our rehearsal of what we want to dream in next year, but we are now dissolving into mush. And we're in the formless, really. We're in the formless in these next just very short, very fast-moving few months until we get into the early months of next year. Neptune, 29 degrees of Pisces. The formlessness is really emphasized here. Could not be clearer. But remember that it is from that state of formlessness that we have the greatest potential to jump in state, a state of being, the greatest potential to really make a leap, as I've spoken about before. But this is a beautiful triangle. It's very much about increasing our psychic sensitivity, our intuition, and I know many of you will be feeling that, and I'm certainly feeling that very much so. Dreams becoming more vivid, telepathy, all kinds of things. Psychic experiences becoming more vivid. All of us are going to experience this to some degree. So we have the long-running Pluto square to Haumea, and Pluto trine to Sedna. And remember that I've spoken about Uranus conjunct Sedna as this kind of ignition of the metamorphosis, Sedna. I've talked at great length about that. And this conjunction here becomes exact next May, but it is operational all the way through because we are in the metamorphosis for humanity. So this is about not only transformation, death and rebirth, but rebirth in a very big way. Rebirth, Haumea and Sedna are both very clear messages about rebirth and regeneration, a change of state, even a change of our biology. Now, Haumea, I think, and I've mentioned this before as well, I think is very related to stem cell medicine, because when the very first week it moved into Scorpio, that's when I had that injection with my own blood plasma in my knee that was so miraculous. And that really true, because Scorpio is related, I think, to the diagnostic or the injectable side of medicine. And stem cells, of course, remember the myth of Haumea, she could transform herself from an ancient crone to a young maiden. So remember that. So there's this turning back our age, and remember that Archangel Raphael channeled via Kelly Kolodny and also Dr. David Clements, they have both talked about this is the time when our telomeres are beginning to lengthen, and the telomeres control longevity. So I do think this is the beginning of us having the potential to live longer, just the beginning of our potential to live longer. Yes, I do. And I think it's going to bring up these dwarf planets, particularly because so many of them are related to, in myth, creator gods. They are helping us connect to the ancient wisdom of Gaia, the ancient wisdom of indigenous people, that we have just forgotten. And so much of that is going to come back. Ancient sites are going to come back, ancient cities and temples that we find underground or underwater, under the seas. They are going to come to light. They're going to surface or be discovered. Again, Neptune, Uranus by very advanced radar. And that is going to trigger our remembrance of everything we used to know in ancient times. It's immensely exciting. We also here have dwarf planet Makemake, which is in a sesquiquadrate, 135 degree to Uranus. Now, Alan Clay, by the way, before I leave Haumea, Alan Clay, who runs Dwarf Planet University, has talked about Haumea as representing unity consciousness. Unity consciousness. So this is where we're headed with Haumea in aspect to Sedna and also to Pluto. And that configuration continues for the next 2 years until 2027. Makemake related to the crater god of Easter Island, the Rapa Nui people, very much about a regenerative principle, because if you look at the history of Easter Island, it was pillaged and really destroyed by the European sailors, but it has turned around its ecosystem again back to health, because the residents of Easter Island understood how to work with natural cycles. Again, going back to nature's natural rhythms and working in harmony with the earth as opposed to pillaging it. Alan Clay talks about these dwarf planets as being a higher octave of consciousness. He sees Makemake as being a higher octave of consciousness to Uranus. And he feels that Uranus gives us one particular worldview which is already elevated because it's related to higher mind and the galactics. Makemake, he feels it's even higher than that. And he said it's related to cosmic consciousness. This is something that Lee Harris, I've noticed, has started to talk about in his channeling of the Z's. They are talking quite a lot now about cosmic consciousness. And Alan Clay says that this is not necessarily something new. It's something we are uncovering and remembering in our consciousness that was always there. We're just, again, taking away the veil. So, very big time. Now, in such rapid times of change, and this is again emphasized by Neptune in Pisces, we may well have a feeling of overwhelm. It's just all too much. It's, the emotion is writ large here. Intense emotion, too much emotion. It feels chaotic. And I feel that disillusionment, which is what Neptune in Pisces, particularly at that last degree, is about, is a necessary step to awaken. I feel disillusionment, and many of us have been through it already, and more people to come. We're each on our own journey, is a necessary step to awakening, because unless you see what's happened and what we as humanity, as a collective, have done really with our collective consciousness, we're not going to do it any differently moving forward. So I do feel it's a necessary step towards sovereignty. So let me stop sharing here, because I want to really go on to something a little more philosophical. So over these next few months, until February, when Saturn and Neptune are both in Aries, it is a little like being in a cocoon. And do benefit from that. Really cocoon yourself, as I mentioned in the last update. Please find time to drop more often into stillness, into silence, just that absolute 0 point. Because that's our place of power. That absolute 0 point where you just leave everything behind. You're your titles, your identities, your anxieties, your worries, put them in a box outside your cocoon before you go into this little sacred place you've developed in your home, because we are birthing an entirely new paradigm. We truly are, and I've a whole new reality. And really use this time also to envisage, to imagine, to dream in what you want to create. Because once Neptune and Saturn move into Aries, Aries is action and it's fast. That's when we're starting to take action on what we've imagined and dreamt. But this is the time to dream, to cocoon, to go into absolutely 0 point, divine neutrality. Really rich creative place to create from. Think of the mush of the caterpillar. It's formless. We are formless. I also think Neptune in Pisces is related to increasing Lemurian energy, which many of us are feeling, which was probably the most perfect civilization that we have any idea about. It's very related to dolphin and whale energy, which is said to be 15th dimensional. If you haven't seen the beautiful, exquisite film called, it's quite an old film now, I think quite a few years old, called the Joan Ocean film. I mean, it cost $11. It lasts about 2 hours and it's worth every penny. It's absolutely exquisite photography, narrated by Joan herself. It's so inspiring, so beautiful. And it really does give the feeling that these beautiful sea creatures that in myth were formed from the chopped off fingers of Sedna by her father are leading or helping to lead us in our evolution. I just think that's exquisite. As we move forwards, Neptune, as many of you know, is very related to music. People who have Neptune prominent in their charts are usually very musical. So this is related to sound healing too. And of course, what that does is bring coherence into our system, bring coherence into every cell of our body. Coherence is a big ingredient in this evolutionary process we're going through. So the wonderful thing about dropping into 0 point, meditation of any kind, being in nature, grounding, candle gazing, all of those things are ways to increase the coherence in your entire energetic system and your health, by the way. And when we're in this state of formlessness, we have infinite possibilities. Dr. David Clements has talked about this. They're just infinite because there's no more structure. Saturn, Neptune, we're dissolving the old structures. They're crashing to earth with a lot of noise. You know, the scenery is really seriously coming down in the theatre. And the reason everything is so loud is because that's happening. And because we're noticing now, because our consciousness is raising enough for us to really notice. And so the energy is moving really fast now. But what I just wanted to say, really, going forwards, our reality is going to remain more malleable, more fluid, which is going to increase the latitude of possibilities. And the particular configuration that we have right now, which I've talked about ad infinitum, I really spotted back in October 2024. And you can check on in fact, I'll put the link below for the video I made in October 2024 called Metamorphosis for Humanity. Because I really was diving deep into excusing the pun, the mythology of Sedna and Homer, and potentially what that meant for us as humanity, since which time the word metamorphosis seems to be popping up here, there, and everywhere. And then very soon after that, I developed filmed quite a long video called The Big Picture, which is looking at this very unique configuration, which astrologers believe has never happened in history before. I mean, we know, again, thanks to Heather Emsworth's research, that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happened at 0 of Aries in 4361 BC, almost 6,000 years ago. But at that time, it did not have a sextile either side of that conjunction to Uranus and Pluto. So it's a very symmetrical configuration. If you look at virtually any video I've done in the last year, but if you look at the big picture, it sets out that big picture, and why I felt so inspired that this was a completely unique period in history for humanity's evolution. And a few months after that, earlier this year, I developed a video called Convergences and Game Changers, where I was really pulling together, because I kind of went out on a limb really with all of those, because I wasn't sure anybody else was really agreeing with me on that, but I was trusting. What I always do is trust the symbolism, the mythology of the astrology, and then see how events fall into place with that. I just trust the mythology. I've been doing this so long, I trust the symbolism, I trust the mythology, and then I wait and see what unfolds. But over the months of this year, which is why I filmed Convergences and Game Changers, I was speaking with so many people who, from their very different disciplines and modalities, were seeing the same thing. Whether it's talking to Dr. Jude Caravan about her cosmological views, and also she's very much a mystic as well. She's been a mystic since childhood. Talking to Ann Tucker with her angel messages. Talking to Dr. David Clements, who I know a lot of you follow now, and he was talking about the very first tip of what his team are calling a new consciousness. Is at the beginning of December. Kelly Kolodny, channeling Archangel Raphael, has talked very consistently since March about we are in gestation, chrysalis, to birth this new consciousness, new galactic consciousness, at the winter solstice. Nancy Rebecca talked about this pivotal time of December, January, being these massive surges of galactic blue light, tipping point. Vivian Chauvet talked about being on a precipice of this tipping point of consciousness, and many more. Lee Harris absolutely is talking about these times in cosmic consciousness. Richard Rudd has been very specific in this metamorphosis with his 55th gene, key of freedom, of the water nymph to the dragonfly, and he sees the completion of the beginning, remember, of that metamorphosis being in 2027. I'm going to be seeing him very soon to do another video and have a sort of update with him. So, but as the months went by, more and more people were adding to the picture that I was seeing astrologically, and that's why I was getting so incredibly excited in all my videos, as you could tell, about, wow, it's not just me, so many of us are seeing this. But I knew that the energy for next year, 2026, is so different from the energy for this year. Because this year, as I say, has been a lot about endings, the outer planets moving backwards, end of old signs, beginning of new, end of old cycles, old signs, beginning of new. I've done that to death in my videos. But next year it's go time, because they are all, as of 26th of April, they are all in their new signs and moving forwards, and no turning back. That's it. No more rehearsal. We've done the rehearsal. We're in the chrysalis now. There's no second rehearsal. And next year it's go time. There's a faster, if you think it's fast now, faster, lighter, fresher. Do I think life will be perfect? No, it never will. Because we need the grit in the oyster to form the pearls. There will always be challenges to help us grow. There'll always be squares and oppositions in a chart. But I do think it is the beginning of a jump in consciousness. I absolutely think it's the beginning of a jump in consciousness. Yes, I do think that. And I didn't know what the catalyst was going to be. I thought, what's going to come along to create that very different energy in 2026? And it's just very odd that this being, this consciousness of Three Eye Atlas has appeared at this time. I just think that's very odd timing. And it arrived with 6 or possibly 7 comets in its wake, almost like a cosmic cavalry. And as you know, Three Eye Atlas will be closest to Venus on the 3rd of November. We don't know what that will do because we don't really know what this being called Three Eye Atlas is. And then it will become closest to the Earth, as you know, on the 19th of December, then closest to Jupiter, linked to wisdom and belief systems, on the 16th of March, very close to the next Aries equinox. And then it begins to exit our solar system along with the comets, the cosmic cavalry. As we know, Three Eye Atlas is also pretty much aligned with our ecliptic plane, around which the planets orbit the sun. It's inclined about 5 degrees, which is actually 5 degrees is the same alignment as the moon has to the ecliptic plane, to form the nodes, to bob up and down north and south through the ecliptic plane to form the nodes. So, but it's pretty much in alignment with the ecliptic plane. And considering it's come from heaven knows where, been traveling for millions of years, maybe billions, maybe, we don't know. That's quite remarkable in itself. And so we don't know what it is. I do believe, as I've said, it's a consciousness. I do believe it's very beneficial. Many other people are feeling that and experiencing that. As I say, I had my bright green psychic experience, which I talked about in the last update. And we'll wait and see. We're going to get more information. We'll start to see it again when it's kind of out of the glare of the sun. It's like looking into the headlights of a car, and we can't see it very well at the moment. But as of late November, and Stephen Burns is a terrific guy to follow on the data with this. He's saying as of late November, it will come out of that glare and we'll start to get more information from it in terms of its position, speed, trajectory. Has it changed? We won't really know until later this month. But do understand how fast these months are moving. I mean, 2025 seems to have lasted about 3 weeks for me. I don't know how it's been for you. It's been incredibly quick, and it will get quicker. So these few months are precious, precious months for us to optimize, let's say. So Saturn moves stationary direct on the 28th of November. Neptune moves stationary direct on the 10th of December. Pluto's already moving direct. So the only remaining planet that's retrograde is Uranus. And Uranus, I believe, moves direct. I believe it's in, it's about the 4th of February. 4th of February. And then they're all moving forwards. So it's very different from the energy that we've experienced this year. So dream big, imagine, cocoon, drop into stillness and silence. Some of the time you can be in total neutrality, 0 point, and just receive these incredible new light codes that are coming from the galaxy and our sun. Receive perhaps whatever Three Eye Atlas is sharing with us. I felt a real shift in energy today on the 2nd. I felt a real excitement that there's much more certainty in where we're going. And maybe it's just because so many of us across the earth have been working at this. Maybe it's just that. And we've created so much momentum now. Well, we know it's unstoppable. But remember, every tiny act of kindness, every smile to a stranger, helping someone across the road, helping a neighbour with her shopping, tight little things day to day. Every single one of those counts to put another little weight in the scales of New Earth and a more loving world for us all. So, yes, these are immensely exciting times. Now, as I say, will it be perfect? Will we, in a bound, be free? No. No. But it is the birth of a new consciousness, I do profoundly believe, and from consciousness, everything manifests. It is fundamental, it's primal. Consciousness is primal. Nothing comes kind of before consciousness, as it were. Because that's the fluidity, that's the malleability, that's the ether, if you like, from which we then manifest. From consciousness, we form our state of being, our frequency, and we kind of step that down into manifestation. So, really remembering and checking in on your state of being is absolutely top priority. What am I feeling? Am I happy? Am I sad? Am I excited? Am I miserable? What am I? Really tune into that and find simple ways to flick it. If you're feeling down, if you're feeling gloomy, can you, hug a dog, hug a child, hug a tree, phone a friend who always makes you laugh, watch an uplifting video, listening to uplifting music. Can you put on some dance music and dance like no one's watching all around the house? Find simple ways that can flick you into a better state. And this isn't about spiritual bypassing. It absolutely isn't. I mean, I'm not living here in an ivory tower. I'm very aware of the absolute horrors that are going on in the world right now. With war, with extreme weather, with people losing their homes. I'm aware of the horrors of the last few years. I am very aware. I'm very aware that although I live in a quite rural area, just 4 or 5 miles from me, there are life-changing crimes going on. I'm very aware of that. Do I focus on them? No. Why don't I focus on them? Because it's going to take my frequency down. And I'm not helping the people involved, and I'm not helping myself, and I'm not helping the collective. So it's not about living in la-la land. Our mastery comes in recognizing the awful things that are happening in the world, but saying, what can I do about them? Well, the first thing you can do is keep a better state of being yourself, keep a better frequency so you don't just dive into the misery with them, because then you're no use to anyone. So that's our mastery of keeping a more equitable state. It's what the masters did. They greeted good and bad news with exactly the same response of this too shall pass. We read about them. So is there a timeline related to war and more suffering and a more synthetic technological future? Yeah, 100%. 100%, but it doesn't have to be your timeline. You can create a much more loving timeline, alone with a whole bunch of us, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of us, who are creating something different. Because you don't want to give life force to what's already dying and that needs to pass away because it has not, if it has not been in highest integrity, has not been for the highest good of humanity, now is its time to pass away. So my profound sense, particularly today, it's really hit me actually, that, and maybe it's that 3i Atlas coming close to Venus, I don't know. We don't have enough information, I don't think, about 3i Atlas for anybody to be definitive about it, but it's a feeling that I know many, many of us have, that it's beneficial for us. And I feel we're turning an energetic corner. And there's just a deep sense of going beyond this tipping point, which other people are now talking about very clearly, and that we are already way ahead of expectations of where we were expected to be at this point. I know Archangel Raphael has talked about that, Dr. David Clements has talked about that, and other people have too that I've mentioned along the way. So there is nothing more important for us to do in these fast-moving cocoon months than to optimize our state of being. There's not, because everything in your life cascades from that, and in how it affects the collective. And I know I've talked about these things a great deal, but I really kind of wanted to emphasize it today because we're not going to get another opportunity energetically, astrologically, that we have now. This is completely unique. It hasn't happened in history before. It may happen several thousand years from now again, I don't know. But it's happening right now. And we would be silly to not make the best of this opportunity. And that's why really I'm making this video. So stay in joy, stay in peace, stay in a sense of freedom, gratitude, compassion for all living beings. What we focus on expands. So if you focus on those, it will magnify those qualities. And remember, astrology isn't just out there in the planets, it's in here. All of this is an inside job, all of it. Because unless you feel things in here, you can't experience them outside in your reality. And the more we adjust our lens and our perspective to realize that we shift from the sense of any fatedness with the planets to we truly are co-creating with astrological energy to weave our present and our future, the more we step into our sovereignty, the more we realize that humanity's efforts have enabled this shift in consciousness to get to where we are right now, to enable these changes to be happening. So do you feel a shift in the energy? Because for me, this is really palpable. And as I say, many of the people I speak to are feeling the same. So, and I think even with astrology, what we've done typically, and I have absolutely just, alongside economists and meteorologists, is go back to the previous cycles where we had something similar and say what happened then and what can we intelligently estimate will happen this time. But I think we've left the tram tracks. And big shout out to Hope Fitzgerald, because Hope Fitzgerald on Lionsgate, 8th of August 2024, and she kindly said we were in cahoots because we were messaging each other and I was sharing the astrology because she'd been instructed by Merlin and Lord Yeshua to take a group. She's a fabulous dowser, visionary, highly psychically sensitive. She leads meditation groups. And she'd been instructed by, I believe it was Merlin and Lord Yeshua, to lead a group to Mount Shasta at dawn on Lionsgate. And she tells the story beautifully. I'll put the link for our conversation below. But this incredible Excalibur sword that was bejeweled psychically appeared before her. And she was instructed to wield it the words were, pierce the film. Pierce the film. And after that, Yeshua, Lord Yeshua and Merlin told her that she had exceeded all expectations and that tear in the film would continue to tear. And that was Lionsgate, 8th of the 8th, 2024. So big shout out for Hope, because I believe that she really gave great service to humanity there, because I think we left the tram tracks of the old hamster wheel and the predictable, or at least it gave us the opportunity to do that. So what is the best lens or perspective with which to view your life? From now on, really endeavor, not spiritual bypassing, being aware of people in extreme circumstances and including them in your meditations. I hope on a daily basis. That's what I suggest for our free 15-minute meditation. I'll put the link for that below. Anticipate the best. Anticipate the best. because that's true of everything in life. If you anticipate the best, you're more likely to get the best. And it's just your lens. And so what I'd suggest going forwards, because we're going to start to live, or we can live much more intentionally from this point on. So what I'd suggest, and I'm doing this myself because, I've rumbled, jumbled through life like the rest of us without being, until recently, very intentional in this, mastering my thinking. So firstly, I would set intentions, particularly first thing in the morning. I have a whole series of, I'm welcoming in total radiant health, I'm welcoming in more joy, more fun, more loving people in my life, etc., etc. So make it present tense. It's already happening. You have the feeling, those things, the feelings the most important, they're already happening. So set intent before every video, every meditation. Let this be for my highest good, the highest good of of all, the highest good of the earth. Set intentions. Secondly, feel gratitude. Feel gratitude for a tree, a friend, a pet, fresh air, clean water if you've got it, sunshine if you're lucky enough in the UK. Feel gratitude. I thank the sun. If the sun, I can see the sun in the morning, I thank the sun for being there. Truly I do. I thank the trees now. Thirdly, use rolling mantras. A great one that came up in the conversation with Cynthia Sue Larson recently was, how good can it get? How good can it get? Miracles happen for me. Universe, show me some miracles today. I live in love, peace, and bliss. I'm the light. I'm the love. I'm the truth. I am. That's from Blossom Goodchild. And you get to the state of sovereignty, and I've actually experienced this 4 times in my life with health, with conditions that were either quite serious or in some cases very serious. And 4 times I have overridden the medical opinion to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to find a miracle, or I'm going to find a more natural way through this. I'm not going down that timeline. I'm going to create a timeline over here. I talked about one of these recently. I'm going to create a different timeline over here, and I'm going to find a miracle or a mini miracle to fix this situation. And I have to say, having had a lot of ill health all through my life, over the last 15 years in particular, my health has actually got better and better. So really know where we are, and know that the uniqueness of the astrology means that the rarity gives potency. The rarity gives potency. And because this opportunity is a narrow window, and the biggest potential evolutionary leap in our lifetime, I believe, commit. Make it a decision. Don't make it a hope. Hope has wobble in it. You hope, but maybe not. Commit. Decide. You are going to absolutely make the best of whatever the rest of this year and through 2026, 27 has it. And then, we're into a very different reality, a very different timeline. And so if I'm completely wrong, if I'm wrong about the astrology, which other astrologers are talking about now, it means that all those other people who I regard with total respect that I speak to, they're all wrong too. And I don't think we're all wrong. And that doesn't include all the people that I interact with one-to-one and on social media who are writing about this, who are having very particular and kind of first-time round experiences of psychic sensitivity. We'd all be wrong. And I don't think we're all wrong. But even if we were, why wouldn't you optimize what might just be your biggest jump and collective's biggest jump? Why wouldn't you do that? Do it as a game, maybe. So do it lightly, playfully, and we'll see where we land. But yeah, as this year has gone on, having spotted that unique configuration and talking to all these amazing people, it was like building a jigsaw for me through 2025, and it's going to be ongoing. But it's like putting another piece in the jigsaw, another piece in the jigsaw, hearing a channeling, talking to Dr. Eric Clems, talking to Jude Caravan, putting another piece in that jigsaw, which is now getting not too far from complete. So, how good can this get? That's down to us. I hope this rather long preamble has helped you, and feel excited, really feel excited that we've left the tram tracks. God bless. Sorry this was so long. Bye for now. I'll be back soon with another different video. Bye for now. And much love, of course.